Hi, this is Siofra Bradigan, and this is Siofra's Magic Alcove. So, I was trying to think of what I wanted to talk about this week and how to approach the subject and, you know, explain my thought processes along these lines. So, we'll see where this goes. We'll see what happens, right? My thinking has to do with how we think, the different mind traps that we might put ourselves in, and how important it is to look at, recognize, evaluate, um, and, you know, the different ways we think about the world and how it works and ourselves and how we function within it. And trying to think of some good ways to explain what I mean by that, because there's a lot of words out there that people use for all sorts of things. It's one of the reasons why I like personal experience, because, it's like not as open to the language, vocabulary interpretation of what people think that means versus something else. So, in my office, I have had any number of different viewpoints that people have expressed and been able to think about where that process leads them. And one that was somewhat startling to me was a woman who was a missionary. She was coming in because of a car accident her and her husband were in. And she was a hardcore missionary. They actually ran a missionary facility here in our local community, which I had my own ethical concerns about. I just do. That's kind of one of my things. But one day she was telling me how she knew that she was doing God's work. So if you're a religious person and you're trying to follow a specific belief system, set of code of doing and stuff like that, and you've created this internal reality, um, this is what she ended up with. So she told me that she knew that she was doing God's work when terrible things happened to her, because the terrible things were things that the devil was doing to try and stop her from doing God's work. And I thought about this for quite some time and realized that what this way of thinking and believing led to was, if she ever experienced a moment of pure joy and happiness, then the devil would have won. And I thought, what a terrible place to be in a life that your success is measured by how miserable you are. And talk about, setting yourself up for having to continue to have traumatic and horrible experiences happen to you, and then being reinforced each time a terrible thing happens, back into yourself that this is a good thing because it means that you're doing the right thing and the good thing, because the bad thing is trying to stop you from doing the thing. It's sort of convoluted and simple at the same time. So it made me think a lot about any, my processes that I might have. And I've encountered it in, different types of situations, but having a similar um, outcome. So my mom is a Celtic harpist, and she is a very accomplished Celtic harpist. She at this point is not playing professionally, not just because of COVID, but because of the weight of her harps and the strength of her arms and so forth. Since she's now 91, she still plays the piano, but the harp is a little bit more of a demanding instrument in that sense. And she actually became somewhat famous on the East Coast in one of the groups that she was in. And she was visiting me one year and was talking about her difficulty with charging people for playing the harp because she had a very fast held belief that God would take away her gift if she made money from it. Now, this is not an uncommon belief that's held by large numbers of people. And I was thinking on my feet that day, and I thought about it for a while. And I said, well, okay, let's look at it this way. So let's change our viewpoint, and we will accept that, you know, this is a statement of your reality that if you charge for your gift, then you're going to lose the ability to play the harp, which in my view seems ridiculous, but, we're looking at hers, not mine. And so what I said was, you're not really charging people for your gift. You're not charging them for playing the harp. What you're charging them for is taking time out of your day and out of your life when you could be doing other things that you enjoy, whether it be watching TV, playing the piano, going to the grocery store, whatever things that might be in your life. And you are committing to taking this chunk of time out of the rest of your life to be there for someone else and to just do the thing they need, whether it's playing at a wedding or a funeral or whatever the gig happens to be. And that actually worked for my mom. She was able then to allow herself to be paid for doing something that she loved. And I think this is not an uncommon viewpoint that a lot of people have. I know when I first started as a massage therapist, the idea that I could be paid for doing something that I really enjoyed doing was very foreign to me. And I don't know why it's probably from my mom that I got that idea. It's like that if you enjoy what you're doing, then and you shouldn't be able to make a living at it. It's a definite mental trap that we've created. And in the beginning, I worried a little bit that people were going to figure out how much fun I was having, and then maybe want me to pay them for the privilege of working on their bodies and fixing their ills and making them feel better. So it's a definite thing that we have, but there's plenty of other things. Like, I had that idea that somehow I was evil, that there was an evil inside of me that I couldn't change or touch or do anything about, and that it was impossible to fix it, impossible to overcome it, no matter what good person I might be, what good deeds I might do. At some point, this evil would rise up and just take over and destroy everything. I know I got that from going to church when I was little. That's one of the things that I glommed, or that glommed into my head, was that. And the fact that such terrible things happened to me as a child sort of reinforced that idea that there must be something horribly wrong with me in order for these things to happen to me. And I think a lot of people who have suffered through abuse might have a similar mental process going on that they're trying to figure out how to get out of, and sometimes may not even realize that they still have that belief running around inside their brain. So, being able to change that took a lot of work, and certainly ritual and magic and meditation was the process that I used in order to transform that basic core belief that I had in the wrongness of me. And there are plenty of other kinds of things like that out there. We have, my mother believed that in order for me to heal from what my father and my uncle did, it was necessary for me to forgive them And I disagreed with that, because for me, the idea of forgiving them for what they did, or making excuses, reasons, or whatever for the unconscionable behavior and torment and stuff that they perpetrated upon me, makes me still a victim, and doesn't allow me to grow beyond my experiences, because it sort of ties you to the person who abused you in a psychic link that's difficult to break. And they already have gotten into your head, because of knowing your weaknesses or enhancing them, and um, giving you a lot of negative feedback about the world and what it should be like or what it could be like. And so my mother was very frustrated with me for not doing it the right way in her mind. Another opportunity to have a boundary. And that was sort of the first, I think, and probably only time I told my mother to shut up, um, was when she was trying to explain to me why I was harming myself. Now, the psychologists talk about the idea that hate is expressed inward, not outward, and that hating someone for what they've done just damages you. And I think that there's probably truth to that. But what I had wasn't hate, it was acknowledgement and acceptance of what had happened to me. And then instead of taking responsibility for my part, which really, how could I have a part when I was 6 years old? There's no conscious ability to do and be and stuff like that, to choose to have that kind of a part. Um, so I acknowledged the fact that it was something that was done to me by someone else, and then gave them the responsibility to figure out what to do about it. Not my responsibility to forgive them, it's their responsibility to figure out how to forgive themselves, which is a big thing to do. I mean, someone who has done something that is just so terribly wrong, I don't know how they do that. If they can truly change, or if it has to wait for another life. And of course, I've explained the reason why I chose to put the yes, or however that's said, on my father, so that he wouldn't make himself come back in an abusive situation to punish himself for what he did to me. Because that doesn't heal anyone, that doesn't heal me, definitely doesn't heal him, and that sort of perpetuates the whole cycle of violence and abuse. And that is probably the focus I have, is finding ways to try and transform those things into something useful for me. But there's so many different times people have said something. I was up at the prison one day, and there's a lot of swallows that are up at that prison. In fact, they build houses for the swallows, then they put them up on the power poles and stuff like that around. And so the swallows come back because they have a ready-made condo or what have you, and they rebuild their nests and come back every spring. And I love swallows, the way they fly, and the shape of them when they're flying around and stuff like that. And I was being walked, I think, back up to the guardhouse after I had done my class, down in the dorm hall or what have you, for the group of people that were interested in what we were doing. And the guard was angry and yelling at the swallows and telling me how incredibly annoyed he was and how much he hated them. And I thought about that, and I thought, wow, that is so sad to me, that this person has decided to see this natural occurrence as an annoyance and something to despise and hate, instead of something to enjoy and revel in. and is, without realizing it, missing out on all these opportunities to smile and laugh because, the birds are flying around. So that kind of thing, it ranges the gamut from, um, the really deep internal processes to even lesser, I guess, intense kinds of things. And that's the purpose of the shadow work and the self-evaluation, is paying attention. So when people talk about like consequences, karma, the rule of three, that things come back to threefold, or whatever it might be, how you think about that makes a difference in how you respond to it. So if you see that that is an arbitrary rule that doesn't make any sense to you, and it's just something to constrain you and keep you from doing what you want to do, then you're going to have one kind of response to it. If you see it as a way to express the potential consequences of working at a level that's generally beyond what most people can do, and that highlights that your responsibility for your actions is greater than the average person because you know what you're doing and you're working with forces, then you're going to have a different reaction to it. And I picked the second one for myself. In fact, I actually expanded on it. I'm like, I thought that the three, things come back to threefold. I thought that that was like just for everybody. And so if I was doing it consciously, then it would triple. So it would come back ninefold. So, I was really setting up potential consequences for myself if I thought I did anything bad or negative or what have you, which probably wasn't all that great either. But still, I did see it as just sort of a way to get me to think about my actions and what the consequences might be as much as I could control. So everything that we do, I mean, anytime we do anything, we're setting some force in motion, and there will be some kind of a consequence for the force we put in motion. If we drop a stone in a pool of water, we make ripples. This is just reality. It's just the nature of energy and how it transforms itself and transforms its environment as it's passing through into something else. So to think that what we do doesn't have consequences is also a trap, that we're beyond that need for consequences, and now whatever we decide to do is right, no matter what the potential consequences might be. So it's definitely a balance when it comes to it. But there are tools for us to use or not. That's the thing. And the ego gets itself involved in it sometimes. Like part of that would be an ego trap, thinking that we're all powerful and that what we do only matters to us, or that we have the right to make choices and decisions for other people without their permission. That would be what I would consider an ego kind of situation, which leads to a lot of unbalanced thinking. In fact, that idea itself leads to the individual who now believes that they are God, and not just that they are God, but now they are God with all the powers that are implied by that, and all the rights to control other people and their environment, regardless of where everyone else is going and what everyone wants to do. And that can lead to a seriously imbalanced life, and disaster, as we've seen, like, with the cult leaders and that kind of thing. The fact that other people believe in them and follow them and feed them doesn't mean that they were right. It just means that some people don't want to have to make their own decisions, don't want to have to be responsible for their own stuff as much, and they want someone else to tell them what to do, which is weird and sad to me, but it's obviously a reality because we see it happen in um, a lot of different venues around the world, in both political and social and everything else. Um, it's just the whole thing just is weird to me. But anyway, aside from that, when people think that they know everything and they are everything, then I know that there's something wrong. Because the more you actually know, the more you realize how much there is to know and how little of it you can possibly know at a time. It's like we all are here for different reasons. We're all walking different paths. And that doesn't mean that one path is better or worse than another. It means that it's different. But, trying to subjugate another group of people in order to feed someone's ego is, to me, clearly a bad idea. It doesn't serve the purpose of the all of us kind of thing. And as a woman, I've certainly been subjected to any number of men who thought I needed to be taught some kind of a lesson that they understood better than I did, which never did go over very well. That's usually not a good way to share information, for sure, especially with me. My stubborn streak that runs in my family would definitely put its foot down and start yelling at that point. But that's the thing. Is like people are frustrated when someone doesn't do what they want, and then they try to make them do what they want instead of going to a different person who wants to do what they want. I mean, yeah. Anyway, it just seems ridiculous. But yeah, that's definitely one of those flags that I see, a red flag, when somebody is certain about everything that they know, because we transform things like history changes, our understanding of history changes as our selves and our culture transform and change where we are at. So what appears as, one thing in one point in history is changed into something else as we learn new things, and then its impact on us transforms. And this is how we can use the past to transform the future, because the waves of understanding can actually go through an entire society. The whole idea of like the 100th monkey philosophy, which actually was started by a guy that used to have a place here in this community before he moved to Hawaii and then passed on. Um, if enough people come to a realization, then suddenly a lot of people will come to the same realization. It's kind of like a psychic dam that breaks. And I think in our societies, at least here, we have seen some of those things start to change. Like all of a sudden, marijuana is becoming legal in almost every state, and at some point it will just become legal across the entire country, because it seems clear that the reasons for making it illegal were an attempt by a group of people to control behavior and a misunderstanding about how it works. Whether I can use it or not doesn't matter. It matters that, criminalizing it and punishing people for trying to find a way to survive was pointless. And we should have known that, because prohibition didn't work. It just put everything underground. It's like, trying to stop a natural process from taking place isn't how you stop a process. Um, it actually builds up more and more energy to it rather than releasing energy or stopping it. It just, like I said, puts it underground, and then it boils up under there to come up later somewhere else. And people have asked me a lot about whether I believe in ascension. I think if I have to say that ascension is possible, this is how it's possible, is by transforming ourselves as individuals. And then our circle of influence and the people that we surround ourselves with and the people that listen to how we feel and how we think about certain things, those people will be influenced by our understanding or our actions, how we behave, how we, not just what we say we want to do, but what we actually do. That whole thing from when I was a kid, which I think is still around, do what I say, not as I do, doesn't work because, children learn by example. They don't learn by words anyway. And that's true for people. Um, so yeah, it's a complicated subject, like everything that has to do with being a person is complicated. There's no simple, easy answer for any of these things, and people wish there were, which is one of the reasons why religion is appealing to a lot of people, because it gives them a structured rules to follow and structured behavior to model. Um, Whether they succeed at it or not, they still have that, set of instructions to go by. And I think that in Aboriginal cultures, there was much more acceptance of difference than there has been in Western civilization. And I use those words, civilization, sort of, tongue in cheek, because that's another whole subject of what is a civilization and what is civilized behavior. But, you know, um, they were closer to their essential core, who they were. The people in a tribal setting know you from the time that you're born. There's not this tremendous separation like there is nowadays between families and family groups and that kind of thing. And so there was a lot less isolation. And so the energetic signature of the land where you were, you're born, and the culture, practices, interactions with the land and the spirits of the land and so forth that grew up with the people, whoever they were, uh, assists a tribal environment to find places for every unique individual that comes in. So they were much more likely to find a place for the woman who wanted to hunt, the man who wanted to sew, um, and nurture and raise children, you know, instead of seeing that as some kind of a bad thing. It was like, this is the essential spirit of this person, and here they are. So, where they're happiest and where they feel most fulfilled is where they will do the most good for the whole. Because that's the way that works. If the parts are in sync with their purpose, their job, their activities, or whatever, then they're adding to the whole instead of taking away from the group in itself. And I think that's one of the things we're dealing with right now, is that incredible separation of people. Even though we have access to more information, we don't have access to more knowledge and experience in context. We have people who are, just trying to um, survive and sell who they are to someone else, or have a belief system that they think everyone else should follow because it would be better for them, or, um, you know, whatever. There's lots of different reasons for doing that. Or they have one of those unfortunate mind traps where they believe that they're worthless and they don't have any value, and they're using like the larger community to get feedback from them to feel like they are okay. I mean, there's certainly a lot of that goes on, not just in, internet communities, but just in general, where if you don't believe at your core that you have intrinsic value without what you do or what you say or how you dress or how other people treat you, then you're likely to get caught into one of those kinds of traps where everyone else's opinion matters more because you don't have a good opinion of yourself. And that's not easy to do. The whole thing is just quite fascinating that the more knowledge we have, the less information we actually have as far as what is the reality of things and what's the truth and so forth. And in the pagan community in general, there's this notion that everyone's beliefs are valid regardless of whether they are based in a unproven, untested, and unaccessible reality. And that makes it difficult to talk straight to people when you say you what you think what. um, and I've gotten into trouble with that myself from other pagans in the community where someone has said something to me and I've gone like, well, that's just crazy. That's just no in any way true or helpful or worthwhile or anything, and we have nothing in common, so you go your way, I'll go mine. As long as you're not harming other people, that's fine by me, but yeah, not not interested. um, but see, even with that, whatever our beliefs are, it's good to look at what are their consequences. So if we believe, for example, that demons exist and are out to get us, like the woman who believed that, the devil was trying to stop her from doing God's work, or any other, magical belief that has that kind of thing in it, then we are much more likely to have things that are identified as demonic in our life because we are focusing on and looking for those things to validate that internal belief system. And that's the problem that we all have, is like looking at the world and the experiences we have and how they validate our belief system. Like me being validated that there was something wrong with me because of my experiences. So just because they mesh doesn't mean that they're actually true. It just means that it's easy to fall into. And if we believe that we're cursed, and that every bad thing that happens to us is the cause of someone else's attention negatively put on us, and that they have more power than we do so that they could actually curse us and make our life misery, then every bad thing that happens gets lumped together into that one bucket of, look, see, this proves that I am cursed. If, on the other hand, we believe that we're not, that the universe is trying to help us and that we're blessed and that everything happens for a reason, or whatever, then we're going to do the opposite. We're going to take out the things that are negative and not pay attention to them and then focus on the positive stuff. But again, there needs to be a balance, because going too far one way or the other isn't helpful when it comes to becoming, which is why they talk about the shadow work. So, yeah, I'm sure you can come up with a lot of different examples of this on your own. And I encourage you to do so, because that's what this is supposed to be about. I mean, the point is to become a more aware individual in your own life and be able to make as many conscious choices as you actually can, instead of allowing the universe to sort of like, throw you about in the wind and the waves and the currents and stuff like that. Figure out where the islands are that you can shelter in while you're waiting for it to go by. Or those analogies work for me. I don't know if they work for anyone else, but figure out which way you want to go and what you want to accomplish and where you want to get to, and then find ways to get there. But being a witch is not a weekend activity. Being a pagan is not a once a month when the moon is full process. It also isn't having to follow a strict design of activities and postures and stuff like that, for me at any rate. It's just the core of who I am and how I see the world and how I interact with the universe, the parts of it that I flow through, how I pay attention to what's going on around me to try and keep myself safe, whether it's from the pandemic or from other people who are driving erratically or, you know, some woman yelling down the street. I arrived at my office the other day and a woman was screaming, "Call 911." So I went to see why. Should I call 911? And she was just walking up the street yelling. And I couldn't see any reason why 911 should be called, so you have to evaluate everything. But, that's like, it's not a separate thing. Um, it's the nature of paying attention, the way we pay attention to the things that are around us. And when you start to pay attention like that, that's when things start to shift and change, because all of a sudden the universe goes like, wow, they're more open-minded than they were a little while ago. So maybe we can give them more information. There was an interesting psychology test that happened, where the university took a group of people that they knew pretty much what their skills were, their level of intelligence and so forth, and they had a group of people who were capable but not really highly intelligent, and then they had a group of people who were highly intelligent, and then they gave them tasks to do, and then had them evaluate how well they did those tasks. And the results, I think, surprised even the people who designed the study, because the people who were not as intelligent all thought they did extremely well. In fact, they were absolutely 100% convinced that they had aced whatever the assignment happened to be, and maybe had done it better than anyone had ever done it before, even though they didn't, from a, empirical point of view. And then the people who were actually intelligent evaluated themselves and said how they didn't think they did as well as they might have been able to do, and that there were lots of things that they could change to be able to do that thing better. And that is kind of like a difference in attitude that I'm talking about here. It's like, once you think you've got it all figured out and you know everything, and you've done such a great job, you're no longer paying attention. You're not looking, you're not evaluating, you're not listening, you're not trying to improve or get better. It's like there's no room for growth in that kind of a way of thinking. And like I said earlier, the more you know, the more you realize there's more to know, and you can't know it all. There's always more to know. And I find it wonderful that we all have such unique experiences, because it sort of adds this texture to all of it, to reality and so forth. And I think it's great that I have this format that I can babble in and share my thoughts, and that some of them are useful to other people. And I think that's marvelous and surprising, especially considering where I started from. And it's, again, really okay not to be perfect. That was one of the things I had. If I could be perfect, everything would be fine. But that doesn't work, because there's no way to be perfect. So nothing is ever fine in that particular mind trap. So This full moon that's coming up, it's coming up Saturday, I think, is probably when it's going to be the most full. And it's still in a lot of places cold out. This is like the snow moon or the wolf moon, I think. Um, in a lot of places, there's still plenty of winter yet ahead, and resources are scarce in ancient times. Um, it's still a good time to reflect on those things inside of ourselves, but not just the things we need to improve on, but to look at and acknowledge the things that we succeed at. Because that's just as important, to be able to be okay with the things that you're good at. When I started doing beading um, and stuff, uh, at one point Ian was concerned that I was going to get a swelled head. There's this whole ego thing, get a swelled head, and it's like an ego trap and all this other stuff. And I I mean, I've been an artist and a creative person my entire life, and this is the first time I've actually found an art form that satisfies all of my artistic tendencies, my ability to succeed at my vision is what really I find wonderful about this particular art form for me. And so I was working on one of my collars, and I was very tickled by the results because, it's like the color comes out, it's got texture, I can touch it, it's like I can see how the colors interact, and I have to change them a lot as I discover it's not the kind of effect I want to have, and I'm always taking them apart and putting them back together. It's like, it's a process for sure, and I was getting to the point where I was close to finished with this one particular piece. And he looked at me, he says, "You really are quite pleased with yourself, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And now he doesn't worry. Um, he knows it's just, my art form. And that was another one of those mind traps where too, if you feel too good about what you've done, somehow you're being prideful and egotistical and all this other stuff. And being able to own the positive stuff can be more difficult, really, than owning what we see as the negative stuff. So this isn't all about, the mind traps are not all about the negative ones, but about the fear of the positive ones as well. So um, when you're taking your time to be with yourself on this upcoming full moon, or whenever you feel the urge to think about those things, think about the way you think and how that might hold you back, but then look at the way you think that helps to move you forward, and be kind to you. And it's okay to make mistakes and not be perfect, but it's also okay to be proud of yourself. We are complex creatures, aren't we? But anyway, I guess that's enough for this subject. I think next video I'm going to try and get into some more practical applications of things and think about which ones I want to do first. But for now, this has been Siofra's Magic Alcove, and I'm Siofra Bradigan. Blessed be.